Welcome to the deep dive. We're going on a microscopic safari today.
Oh, safari.
Yeah, a microscopic safari
Yeah.
into a world teeming with all kinds of organisms,
like it.
from parasitic worms
Right.
to fungi.
Cool.
Get ready to discover their unique characteristics, life cycles,
Okay.
and potential impact on human health.
That's like a hidden universe.
Yeah.
Right under our noses.
That's a great way to put it. It really is.
So let's start our journey
Okay.
with a creature that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie. The Skolex.
Okay.
What exactly is a Skolex, and why should we be interested in it?
Well, the Skolex is the head of a tapeworm, and it's equipped with these hooks and suckers that allow it to attach itself to the intestinal wall.
So it's basically a microscopic anchor
It's
holding this potentially massive tapeworm in place.
That's right. And this attachment is crucial for the tapeworm's survival because it allows it to absorb nutrients directly from the host's digestive system.
Oh, that's pretty clever, albeit a bit creepy.
But how does this tie into the tapeworm's reproductive process?
Well, the Skolex itself doesn't reproduce,
No.
but it plays a vital role in the process. As the tapeworm grows, it develops segments called proglottids, and each of these proglottids contains both male and female reproductive organs.
So each segment is essentially like a self-contained reproductive unit.
Exactly.
Wow.
And these proglottids, they break off and are shed in the host's feces,
Okay.
releasing eggs into the environment and
Right.
continuing the tapeworm's life cycle.
Speaking of unsettling life cycles, let's talk about another intestinal dweller, Trichuris,
Okay.
or as it's more commonly known, the whipworm.
Right.
I mean, the name alone is enough to make you squirm, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
So what can you tell us about this particular organism?
Well, whipworms, they're named for their distinctive whip-like shape,
Right.
and they're responsible for a disease called Trichuris,
Okay.
which affects millions of people globally.
Wow, that's a huge number.
Yeah, particularly in areas with poor sanitation.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
How do these whipworms spread so widely?
Well, whipworm eggs, they contaminate soil and plants
Okay.
when an infected person defecates in the environment.
Okay.
And these eggs can then be ingested by another person if they eat contaminated food or don't wash their hands properly.
That's a good reminder to always wash your hands thoroughly,
Yes, always.
especially before eating.
Especially before eating.
What kind of symptoms does trichuriasis cause?
Well, the symptoms, they can range from mild to severe.
Okay.
They include things like dysentery, which is basically severe diarrhea,
Uh-huh.
and anemia, which is caused by the worms feeding on blood from the intestinal lining.
Oh, so they're
Yeah.
stealing your
Yeah,
nutrients.
they're taking what they need.
Okay, that's officially on my list of things to avoid.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Let's switch gears and talk about another worm that many of us might be familiar with, especially during childhood, Enterobius vermicularis,
Okay.
or the pinworm.
Oh, pinworms.
Yeah, I know you've heard of them.
Everyone's heard of pinworms.
So what can you tell us about those?
Well, they're classified as nematodes or roundworms,
Okay.
and they're notorious for causing intense itching around the anus,
Yes, especially at night.
particularly at night.
I remember those days.
It's not a fun time.
It is not a fun time. So what causes that specific type of itching?
It's the female pinworms.
Okay.
They lay their eggs in the folds of skin around the anus,
Mhm.
and that causes significant irritation.
So it's not the worms themselves, but their eggs that are the main source of discomfort.
That's right.
Wow. Thankfully, pinworms are relatively harmless and easily treated with medication.
Yeah, very easily treated.
But they are highly contagious.
Yes, fair.
Spreading through human-to-human contact or by touching contaminated surfaces.
It's very easy to spread them, unfortunately.
That makes sense considering how common they are amongst children.
Yeah, especially kids.
Now, back to those impressive tapeworms.
Okay.
We talked about the Skolex, but let's delve into the Taenia genus,
Right.
known for their incredible size.
Yes, they can get quite large.
So tell us about that.
Well, Taenia tapeworms can reach lengths of up to 30 feet,
30 feet?
longer than a school bus.
That's mind-boggling.
It is pretty amazing.
Their life cycle must be quite a journey to reach that size.
It is. Taenia species have intermediate hosts, like cattle or pigs.
Okay.
Humans become infected by consuming undercooked meat containing the larval stage of the tapeworm.
So it's a multi-stage life cycle.
Yes.
Moving from animal to human. What are the different stages involved?
Well, it starts as an egg, then hatches into an oncosphere, which is a 6-hooked larva that burrows into the intermediate host's muscle tissue,
Okay.
and then develops into the adult stage we discussed earlier,
Okay.
residing in the human intestine.
It's quite the complex journey.
Yeah, they get around.
Now let's move from the world of worms to another common parasite, Giardia,
Okay.
infamous for causing traveler's diarrhea.
Oh.
What makes this parasite so troublesome?
Well, Giardia is a microscopic protozoan parasite.
Okay.
And it has a 2-stage life cycle, the trophozoite and the cyst.
Okay.
The trophozoite is the active feeding stage that
Yeah.
attaches to the lining of the small intestine.
So it's setting up shop
Yeah.
and causing digestive chaos.
Pretty much, yeah.
And the cyst stage is the hardy infectious stage
Right.
that allows Giardia to survive outside the host's body.
Exactly.
And how does this relate to contaminated water?
Well, Giardia cysts are shed in the feces of an infected person,
Got that.
and if those feces contaminate a water source, like a lake or stream, anyone drinking that water without proper filtration or treatment can ingest the cyst and become infected.
That's a good reason to be cautious about your water sources when traveling.
It is, absolutely.
Now let's talk about a parasite that causes discomfort in a different way. Sarcoptes scabiei,
Okay.
the itch mite, responsible for scabies.
Scabies mites, yeah.
What can you tell us about this tiny troublemaker?
Well, scabies mites are masters of stealth and irritation.
Okay.
Female mites burrow into the outer layer of skin, creating tunnels where they lay their eggs.
Huh.
And this causes intense itching and a rash.
So it's like a microscopic infestation happening right beneath your skin.
That's a good way to put it.
How do you even know if you have scabies?
Well, scabies is typically diagnosed through a skin scraping, where a doctor examines a small skin sample under a microscope to look for the mites, eggs, or their burrows.
So it's like a detective story,
Yeah,
searching for clues
exactly.
under the microscope.
Looking for the evidence.
How does this mite spread?
Scabies is primarily spread through direct, prolonged skin-to-skin contact with an infected person.
Okay.
Sharing bedding or clothing can also transmit the mites.
Okay, that's good to know.
Good to be aware of.
Now, enough with the parasites for a bit.
Right.
Let's shift gears and talk about something a little less creepy-crawly.
Okay.
Fungi.
Fungi, great.
Where should we begin in this vast and diverse kingdom?
Well, let's start with something familiar, the common bread mold, Rhizopus. You've probably seen it as a fuzzy, white, or grayish growth on bread, fruits, and vegetables.
Oh, absolutely.
It's pretty unmistakable.
What's happening beneath that fuzzy exterior?
Well, Rhizopus is a fascinating example of a fungus that reproduces both sexually and asexually.
Oh, wow.
Sexually, it produces zygospores.
Okay.
And asexually, it produces sporangiospores, which are easily dispersed by air currents, leading to its rapid spread.
So it's like a microscopic dandelion.
Yeah.
Spreading its seeds on the wind.
That's a great analogy.
What about its structure? What makes Rhizopus unique?
Well, Rhizopus has a filamentous structure composed of thread-like hyphae that form a network called a mycelium.
Okay.
A mycelium absorbs nutrients from the substrate it grows on.
Gotcha.
It's an aseptate fungus, meaning its hyphae lack cross walls, which allows for rapid nutrient transport.
So it's like a vast network of interconnected highways.
Exactly.
Efficiently moving nutrients throughout the fungus.
Yeah, they've got a good system.
While Rhizopus is generally harmless, it can pose a risk to people with weakened immune systems, so it's worth being aware of.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Good to know. Let's move on to another fungus, but this time one that's famous for its positive contributions. Penicillium.
Penicillium, yes.
It's best known as the source of penicillin, the groundbreaking antibiotic, right?
Absolutely.
So it's a pretty important fungus.
Very important.
Penicillium revolutionized the treatment of bacterial infections.
It did. It really changed the game.
And it doesn't stop there.
No.
It's also used in the production of certain cheeses, like blue cheese and Roquefort.
It gives them that distinctive flavor.
From saving lives to adding flavor to cheese,
Yeah.
it's a versatile fungus.
It is a very versatile fungus.
How is penicillium classified?
Well, Penicillium belongs to the kingdom fungi and the phylum Ascomycota, also known as sac fungi.
Okay.
It's distinguished by forming a sac-like structure called an ascus during sexual reproduction. This ascus contains ascospores.
So it's all about the spores, whether they're involved in spreading mold on bread
Right.
or creating life-saving antibiotics.
They're the key players.
Now, how does penicillium obtain its nutrients?
Like many fungi, it absorbs nutrients by releasing enzymes into its surroundings, breaking down complex organic molecules and absorbing the simpler ones for nourishment.
So it's like it pre-digests its food externally.
Exactly.
Clever.
It's a highly efficient way for fungi to get the nutrients they need.
Now, let's journey back to the world of parasites.
Okay.
But this time to tropical regions, where a flatworm called Schistosoma mansoni causes a disease known as schistosomiasis.
Schistosomiasis, yeah.
Tell us more about this parasitic flatworm.
Okay, well, Schistosoma is a blood fluke belonging to the class Trematoda. The adult stage lives in the veins around the intestines or bladder, depending on the species. And it lays eggs that are released into the environment through urine or feces.
So it's a blood dweller.
Yes, they live in the bloodstream.
How do these eggs spread the infection?
Well, Schistosoma has a fascinating two-host system, with freshwater snails serving as intermediate hosts. When the eggs reach freshwater, they hatch into larvae called Myricidia, which penetrate the snails.
So the snail acts as a temporary home for the parasite.
That's right. It's an essential part of their life cycle.
And then what?
Well, inside the snail, the Myricidia transform into other larval stages. Sporocysts, then cercariae. These cercariae are released from the snail back into the water.
Got it.
And they can penetrate human skin, causing infection.
So swimming in contaminated water can be risky in these regions.
It can be.
What happens once these cercariae enter the human body?
They transform into schistosomulae, which migrate to the liver and mature into adult worms.
Completing the cycle.
Yes, the cycle continues.
It's a complicated journey for this parasite.
It is a remarkable journey.
What are the symptoms of schistosomiasis?
Well, they range from fever, chills, and abdominal pain to more serious complications like liver damage and bladder problems in chronic cases.
It's a serious condition.
It can be, yes.
Let's switch gears to another type of parasite.
Okay.
One that's sexually transmitted. Trichomonas vaginalis.
Trichomonas vaginalis, right?
What can you tell us about this one?
Well, Trichomonas vaginalis is a protozoan parasite that causes trichomoniasis, a common sexually transmitted infection.
And what are the symptoms of this infection?
Well, common symptoms include itching, burning, and irritation in the genital area, along with a foul-smelling discharge. It's important to remember that both males and females can be infected, although it's more often diagnosed in women.
That's an important point.
It is.
Now, onto a parasite infamous for causing a devastating disease.
Yeah.
Plasmodium, the culprit behind malaria.
Malaria, yes.
What's happening in this microscopic image of Plasmodium?
Well, this image shows the parasite in various stages within red blood cells. You can see merozotes, which are released to invade new cells.
And ring stages, which are early forms of the parasite.
It's like a microscopic invasion of the bloodstream.
A very apt description, yes.
And we mentioned earlier that Plasmodium has a complex life cycle involving both human and mosquito hosts.
Right.
So walk us through that life cycle.
Well, it begins with an infected mosquito injecting sporozoites into a human's blood.
Oh.
These sporozoites travel to the liver, multiply, and release merozoites back into the bloodstream.
And those merozoites are what we're seeing in the red blood cells.
Exactly. They infect red blood cells, multiply, and eventually develop into gametocytes, the sexual stage of the parasite. If another mosquito bites an infected person, it picks up these gametocytes.
Continuing the cycle.
And so the cycle continues.
It's a delicate dance between parasite, mosquito, and human, with serious consequences for human health.
It is a complex interplay.
Now, let's take a break from the parasites and talk about a much more friendly fungus. Saccharomyces cerevisiae, better known as yeast. Yeast, yes. Everyone's favorite fungus.
It's amazing to think that something so tiny has had such a big impact on human culture and cuisine.
It really is. It's a fundamental part of so many things we enjoy.
How can we tell that it's a eukaryote just by looking at this image?
Well, you can see that the cells are larger than 2 micrometers and they have a nucleus. Both of which are characteristics of eukaryotic cells.
So it's more complex than it looks.
It is. Don't let its size fool you.
And what kingdom and phylum does Saccharomyces cerevisiae belong to?
It belongs to the kingdom fungi and the phylum Ascomycota, making it another sac fungus.
It seems like we've encountered quite a few sac fungi today.
We have. They're a diverse and important group.
What's unique about Saccharomyces cerevisiae's reproduction?
Well, unlike some fungi that reproduce both sexually and asexually, Saccharomyces cerevisiae primarily reproduces asexually through a process called budding.
Budding. So it creates mini versions of itself.
Exactly. These buds eventually detach and form new yeast cells, which is why yeast is so efficient at multiplying and spreading.
Making it a perfect tool for baking and brewing.
It is a baker's and brewer's best friend.
That's fascinating.
It is.
It's amazing how something so tiny can have such a big impact on our lives.
It is truly remarkable. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're continuing our exploration of the microscopic world.
I'm ready for more.
And I'm really eager to dive into some of the more visually striking organisms that we have in store today.
Okay, sounds good.
So last time we covered a lot of ground, from the Skolex of a tapeworm to the fascinating world of yeast.
Yeah, we did.
What other wonders await us?
I'm ready.
Well, let's shift gears and talk about an organism that's both beautiful and potentially dangerous.
The mushroom.
Okay, specifically a genus called Coprinus, known for its distinctive gills.
Oh yes, those long, delicate structures we saw under the microscope.
Right.
They look almost like the pages of a book.
A very apt description.
Yeah.
And those gills are where the magic happens, so to speak.
Oh, okay. They're lined with specialized cells called basidia, which produce sexual spores called basidiospores.
So those tiny dark dots we saw scattered amongst the gills were actually spores.
Yes.
Ready to spread and create new mushrooms.
Precisely.
Wow.
Basidiospores are incredibly small and light, easily carried by the wind to new locations.
Makes sense.
It's a remarkably efficient way for fungi to disperse and colonize new environments.
It's amazing how these tiny organisms have such a big impact on the world around us.
It really is. It's fascinating.
Speaking of impact, you mentioned that some Coprinus mushrooms are edible,
That's right.
while others are poisonous.
Yes, unfortunately.
How can you tell the difference?
That's a great question. Identifying edible mushrooms is a skill that requires expert knowledge.
Okay.
Even experienced foragers can make mistakes, and the consequences can be severe, so I highly recommend sticking to the varieties you find at the grocery store.
Yeah, I'll leave the foraging to the experts.
Probably a good idea. Now, let's move on to another fungus that caught my eye. Pitziza, with its curious cup-shaped fruiting bodies.
Ah, Pitziza, another fascinating member of the Ascomycota phylum, like the Penicillium we talked about earlier.
Right.
And just like Penicillium, Pitziza produces its spores within sac-like structures called asci.
And those dark structures we saw lining the cup were the ascospores.
Well, exactly. Those ascospores are released into the air and carried by the wind to new locations where they can germinate and grow into new Pitziza fungi.
It's incredible how these microscopic structures hold the potential for a whole new generation of fungi.
It is. It's a remarkable process.
Unlike some of the parasitic organisms we've discussed, Pitziza isn't considered a pathogen, right?
That's correct. Pitziza species actually play a valuable role in the ecosystem by decomposing organic matter, helping to recycle nutrients back into the soil.
Interesting.
They might not be as glamorous as mushrooms, but they're definitely doing important work.
So they're more like nature's recyclers.
Precisely. They break down dead leaves, wood, and other organic debris,
releasing nutrients that can be used by plants and other organisms.
Oh.
It's a vital part of maintaining a healthy ecosystem.
Well, that's good to know. Now, let's revisit the world of parasites and talk about an organism that causes a truly devastating disease. Plasmodium, the culprit behind malaria.
Malaria is a serious global health concern.
It is.
Affecting millions of people each year.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
And as we discussed earlier, Plasmodium has a complex life cycle that involves both human and mosquito hosts.
Right. We saw those merozoites and ring stages inside red blood cells. It was like a microscopic war zone.
A very apt description.
Yeah.
And that's just a small part of the parasite's journey. It starts with an infected mosquito injecting sporozoites into a human's bloodstream.
And those sporozoites then travel to the liver, multiply, and eventually release merozoites back into the bloodstream.
Exactly. And those merozoites invade red blood cells, causing the symptoms we associate with malaria. Fever, chills, sweating, headache, muscle aches, and fatigue.
It sounds absolutely miserable. It can be quite debilitating, and in severe cases, even fatal.
So how can we break this cycle of infection?
Well, there are a number of strategies, including mosquito control measures like insecticide-treated bed nets and indoor residual spraying.
Okay, and there are antimalarial drugs to treat the infection, right?
Yes, but drug resistance is a growing concern. It's a constant battle to stay ahead of the parasite.
That highlights the importance of ongoing research and public health efforts to combat this global health threat.
It does. It's an ongoing challenge.
Now let's shift gears to a microscopic organism that's much more benign and actually quite beneficial to humans. Saccharomyces cerevisiae, better known as yeast.
Ah, yeast.
A single-celled fungus that's been a faithful companion to humanity for thousands of years.
It has. From baking bread to brewing beer, yeast has certainly made its mark on human civilization.
What makes this tiny organism so versatile?
Well, from a scientific perspective, Saccharomyces cerevisiae is a model organism, used extensively in research to study fundamental cellular processes.
So it's not just a culinary hero, but a scientific one as well.
Exactly.
We identified it as a eukaryote earlier because of its size and the presence of a nucleus within the cell, right?
Precisely.
And taxonomically speaking, Saccharomyces cerevisiae belongs to the kingdom fungi and the phylum Ascomycota, the sac fungi.
That's correct.
So it's in the same phylum as Penicillium and Pitziza.
That's right. But unlike those fungi, Saccharomyces cerevisiae primarily reproduces asexually through a process called budding.
Budding, so it's like a miniature version of itself, grows out from the parent cell.
A very apt analogy.
Yeah.
And those buds can eventually detach and form new yeast cells.
Yep.
It's a simple but effective way to reproduce and spread.
Right.
And it's this ability to reproduce quickly and efficiently that makes yeast such a valuable tool in baking and brewing.
It does, yeah. The yeast feeds on the sugars in the dough, or the wort, producing carbon dioxide gas, which causes the bread to rise or the beer to ferment. It's a beautiful symbiotic relationship, with humans providing the yeast with food and the yeast rewarding us with delicious bread and beverages.
A win-win situation for sure.
Now shifting back to parasites, we talked earlier about Giardia, the culprit behind traveler's diarrhea.
Giardia, yes.
We discussed the cyst stage.
Right.
But I'm curious to learn more about the trophozoite stage.
Well, the trophozoite is the active feeding stage of Giardia. Imagine it as a microscopic suction cup, attaching itself to the lining of the small intestine and disrupting the digestive system.
So it's like a tiny unwelcome guest setting up camp in your gut.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
And its presence can lead to a range of unpleasant symptoms, including diarrhea, abdominal cramps, bloating, nausea, and fatigue.
Not exactly the kind of souvenirs you want from your travels.
No, definitely not.
We talked about how the cysts are shed in the feces of an infected person and can contaminate water sources, making it crucial to be careful about drinking water. especially when traveling.
It is. It's really important to be mindful of your water sources when you're in areas where Giardia might be present.
The trophozoite stage is what's responsible for causing those miserable symptoms.
Right. It is. It disrupts the normal functioning of the small intestine, interfering with nutrient absorption and causing inflammation.
So it's not just a matter of inconvenience, it can actually impact your health.
Absolutely, especially in young children, the elderly, or those with weakened immune systems.
Okay.
Giardia infections can be more severe and lead to complications like dehydration and malnutrition.
That's serious.
It can be, yes. This underscores the importance of understanding these parasites, how they spread, and how to protect ourselves from infection.
Let's talk about another parasite that causes misery on a different front. The skin.
Yeah.
We discussed Sarcoptes scabiei, the itch mite responsible for scabies.
Oh, yes, scabies. It's a highly contagious skin condition.
It is.
Caused by tiny mites that burrow into the skin and lay their eggs, leading to intense itching.
It's like a microscopic home invasion.
Yeah.
But instead of stealing your belongings, they're stealing your peace of mind.
A very apt analogy.
And the worst part is that intense itching, often worse at night, that drives people to distraction.
It's not pleasant at all.
We talked about how it's diagnosed through skin scraping, but how do you get rid of these pesky mites?
Well, scabies is treatable with topical medications that kill the mites.
Okay.
But here's the catch. Everyone in the household and anyone who has had close contact with the infected person needs to be treated simultaneously.
So it's like a microscopic game of whack-a-mole.
Exactly. Otherwise, you're just setting yourself up for reinfestation.
We gotta get them all at once.
That's right. It's important to follow the treatment guidelines carefully to ensure everyone is free of these mites. Welcome back to the deep dive.
I'm excited for more.
As we wrap up our microscopic safari, I thought we could delve into a final parasitic organism.
Right.
And then explore one last fascinating fungus.
Sounds good. What's on the agenda?
Well, let's start with a parasite that causes a rather unpleasant intestinal infection. Entamoeba histolytica.
Okay.
It's a protozoan parasite that causes amoebiasis, a disease that can range from mild diarrhea to severe dysentery.
That doesn't sound pleasant at all.
No, it's not a fun one.
What makes this particular parasite so potent?
Entamoeba histolytica has 2 stages in its life cycle.
Okay.
The one we're focusing on now is the trophozoite stage,
Okay.
which is the active feeding stage of the parasite.
Right.
It wreaks havoc in the intestines,
Makes sense.
leading to those unpleasant symptoms you mentioned.
So what's so distinctive about this trophozoite stage?
One of the key features that helps microbiologists identify Entamoeba histolytica is its nucleus.
Okay.
It has a characteristic bullseye appearance with a central karyosome surrounded by a clear halo. It's a telltale sign that we're dealing with this particular parasite.
So it's like a microscopic bullseye.
Yeah, bullseye on a bad guy.
But instead of a target, it's a parasite.
Exactly. Not something you want to see under the microscope.
How does this parasite spread?
Entamoeba histolytica is spread through the fecal-oral route.
Okay.
The parasite cysts, which are the hardy infectious stage, are shed in the feces of an infected person.
Right.
If those feces contaminate food or water and someone ingests them, they can become infected and develop amoebiasis.
That's a good reminder to always be mindful of food and water safety, especially when traveling.
It is. You can't be too careful.
Now for our final stop on this microscopic safari.
Okay, I like that.
What fascinating fungus do you have in store for us?
Well, let's end our journey with another member of the Ascomycota phylum,
Okay.
Ptsisa, a genus known for its cup-shaped fruiting bodies.
We've encountered quite a few members of this phylum today.
They have. They're a fascinating group.
What makes Ptsisa stand out?
Well, those distinctive cup-shaped fruiting bodies are a key characteristic. And inside those cups, you'll find the ascospores, contained within sac-like structures called asci.
So those spores are like tiny time capsules waiting for the right conditions to germinate and grow into new fungi.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
They're essentially the seeds of the fungus, ready to be dispersed and start a new generation.
And unlike some of the organisms we've discussed today, Ptsisa species are not considered pathogens.
That's correct.
They actually play an important role in decomposing organic matter in the environment.
They do. They're nature's recyclers.
So they're more like nature's recyclers, breaking down organic material and returning nutrients to the soil.
Exactly. They're a vital part of maintaining a healthy ecosystem.
Well, that's a reassuring note to end on.
It is, isn't it?
We've encountered parasites that cause digestive distress and skin irritation.
Yeah.
Fungi that help us bake bread and brew beer.
Right.
And even a microscopic organism that's instrumental in scientific research.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. It's a reminder that even though these organisms are tiny, their impact on our lives and the world around us is immense.
It really is. They influence everything from our food to our health.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it?
It is.
We share this planet with a vast and diverse array of microscopic life.
We do.
And understanding these organisms is crucial for our own well-being and the health of our planet.
It's essential for our survival.
As we continue to explore this microscopic world, who knows what other wonders and challenges we might uncover.
That's the beauty of science, isn't it? There's always something new to discover, even in the smallest corners of our universe.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have.
We'll see you next time.
Until next time, keep exploring.